Hello and welcome to Grounded Voices. Right from his engagement with the United Dalit Students Forum in 2012 to becoming one of the founding members of BAPSA in 2014 to contesting the JNU Student Union elections in 2019, Jitendra Suna is an important figure in establishing the anti-caste discourse in JNU. In this episode, joining with me today is the extraordinary student leader and an intellectual who is learning and writing Dalit history. Jitendra Suna, welcome to Grounded Voices.
Thank you.
So you are one of the founding members of BAPSA. So let me begin my question about what made you enter into the world of Dr. Ambedkar and his writings?
Yeah, my entering to the world of Ambedkar, actually, we can say it is not me who enter into the world of Ambedkar. Rather, Ambedkarite movement introduced me Ambedkar. So it is through Ambedkarite movement from Maharashtra and all, I came to know about Baba Sahib Ambedkar in 2013 and what kind of leader he was and what are the works he has done for the oppressed communities in India. So that's how I came to know about Ambedkar in, it was in 2012. So after that, I came to know, I became conscious about my social reality and the conscious about the caste and untouchability practice in various part of India and in particularly in my village and my areas and my state. And that's where I started my own started my activism and then I started reading Ambedkar and further I enter into this higher education. And after I joined JNU in 2013. I was a member of UDSF, United Dalit Students Forum, and from there we were doing activism whenever there were atrocities on SC/ST population. We used to conduct protest in Delhi from JNU. So that was a starting point of our activism, and gradually in a strong Savarna hegemonic place like JNU, it was very difficult for oppressed and marginalized students to have their own voice, and that's where we started thinking that there must be a independent autonomous voice for oppressed marginalized community in campus, and that's why we were started thinking about BAPSA in 2014. So yeah, we deliberated for almost 1 year. Then we formed Birsa Ambedkar Phule Student Association. Yeah.
But you know, there were dubious tendencies from both the left and the right to project BAPSA as a potential threat. So what are the kind of struggles you think the Ambedkarites in student politics have to face across the universities in India?
Yeah. So it is very difficult to have that autonomous voice, and you if you study the left politics and the right and center politics in campuses like JNU and other such university, then you will understand that it is basically Savarna student who monopolize over this across the political spectrum. And that's where they started appropriating the voices of the oppressed community students and all, and they became kind of saviors, so-called saviors. And it is very difficult to sustain and raise a voice of its own when it's when your hegemony and monopoly is created by the so-called left politics under the banner of so-called left politics. Then when there is already a notion that everything attached to left politics is universal and good and egalitarian and all kind of such values. So under those circumstances, it is very difficult to expose the kind of Brahmanical tendency they have, and that's how they propagate and manipulate the voice of the people, and they propagate that BAPSA is a threat. And it was basically in the first year of election in JNU, they try to invisibilize us and try to ignore us, but it's in from 2016 they were very much aware that this is a strong force and they cannot ignore, and they started maligning BAPSA and other such political organization, whether the organization of Dalit student or Muslim student. So they have like branded that these people are doing identity politics and all that. But because of the kind of movement which UDSF, then BAPSA and other organizations such as fraternity movement, which is led by Muslim students, then OBC OBC student also raised in under the banner of OBC forum, and yeah, these kind of forces basically emerge in JNU, and that is why like we can see many voices right now, and previously before 2014 there were hardly these voices raised, or hardly these voices were in the domain of public discourse, which right now is very much visible. And many activists from, if you see recent protest and all, many activists are like challenging this Hindutva fascist regime from their own understanding and from own capacity. Yeah.
And you know, there are many prejudices in society, like, oh, you came by reservation, that make people feel like you are not fit to work in the system. So what are the ways you think to overcome such prejudices?
Yeah. So this is not the one kind of prejudiced the student from marginalized section face in such university spaces, but there are different ways. This is one aspect that oh, you guys came from reservation, or you to reservation you have, so you will get easily for your MPhil or PhD. That's how this stigma, along with the reservation, that this stigma attached to reservation is very much consistent and very much in public domain. That's why without consciousness also they have this prejudice within them, and that's how we get humiliated many times. And further, I would like to say that along with that, there are many other prejudice. Suppose the university and its pedagogy is very systematically monopolized by Savarna community, as this professorships and all teaching posts are very much monopolized by Savarna professors. It is very difficult to find out the pedagogy from SC/ST and minority background, and you can't find that history, culture, religion, and many other such aspects. And that's why you will face discrimination inside classroom. That is why once there was a class in when I was in enrolled in MA master in history department. I was doing modern history. A professor was teaching, and he was telling that how Periyar, Ambedkar, these people were casteist, and how the Congress and Gandhi were doing nationalist politics and all. Then I asked if that is the case, then why Periyar was was fighting for independence for 6 years, but later on he came to realize that how the Congress politics and Gandhian politics very much casteist and Brahmanical, and later on he moved on and start a self-respect movement. And when we see Ambedkar and his movement also, like we see same trend. So the movement for independence was mostly led by Savarna, and it's a kind of power transfer to monopolize over the power and rule over India. That's how the things happen. So therefore, you will find that the ideological conflict within the classroom, and because of student coming from marginalized section will ask this unconventional question, and question out of that syllabus will make a teacher discriminate students, and that's how they discriminate inside the classroom in teaching. And further than viva voice, then you have once you come to university through reservation and all, they will discriminate you in viva, then dropout case because of linguistic barrier and other aspect. So all kind of this discriminations happen, and this is precisely because this is precisely why we need to have student movement inside campus, so that they can raise this concern and try to check those kind of violence and discrimination and exclusion faced by oppressed community and oppressed community student. And that's what we are seeing today in various campuses. Dalit student, Adivasi student, and Muslim student are rising and raising their voices. So this is one aspect to check. See, there is no institutional aspect of checking this discrimination. Like we have like GSKs, gender sensitization body in every institution, but we don't have any kind of such institution in university spaces where caste discrimination is getting checked. Like we can check the discrimination and exclusion faced by the student or Adivasi student or Muslim student for that matter. We have equal opportunity cell, but these cells are dead in university spaces. It is not working that. SC/ST cell, there is only only tokenism. So in the name of tokenism, there are, but there is no serious institutional mechanism to address this. Now, after Rohit Vemula movement, there was a talk of Rohit Act to check this discrimination and all, but it was only within the circle of Ambedkar section or Bahujan section, if you would say. So it was limited to that space, but it never became the national issue. So there is to check. There is a larger aspect and structural nature of academics and structural nature of the power dynamics in India need to change. So without changing the structure and nature of the academics we have, nature of representation we have, it's very difficult to difficult for marginalized student to sustain in these institutions.
Yeah. And you are from the state of Odisha. So can you tell us about the social reality of marginalized sections in the state, and how are you working for the communities there?
Yeah. So social realities, like it is not only about India, like in current pandemic situation, there were rampant caste atrocities across India, and it is like it's all public domain, and there are various news of atrocities and abuse of Dalit women and all kind of discrimination we have. But what is the mainstream see only those kind of violence which is getting seen in the public domain. When I see public domain, it's basically mainstream media and all. But it is, if you see untouchability, then untouchability is kind of it's a permanent apartheid. It's a perpetual apartheid which exists in India. So in state of Orissa, untouchability is the same as in the 19th century or 20th century, you can say. And when Babasaheb Ambedkar was fighting for temple entry movement, or after that religious conversion and fighting for the right to drink water. So in right now, also the similar situation that we cannot enter public domain. Like public domain, we cannot use the public tube well or public bathing system and all. So there are different sections of suppose there is a pond, then it's divided. The bathing place is divided according to the caste, and untouchable cannot go to a different place other than their own prescribed place. So the caste and untouchability is still practiced, and that is why we must get angry, not only to the kind of visible violence we see, but the kind of untouchability still exists in Orissa. So we are trying to work in a limited manner right now. Like we are doing this cultural movement, and also we fight whenever there are atrocities. We visit the place and try to file Atrocities Act and all. And also, like, we are trying to organize youth. So we help youth to get into higher education. We support them not only morally but financially, and all kind of whatever support system information they need to get. So we organize yearly program at the end of the year, and we invite 300 to 400 student youth to participate in our youth and social transformation conference. So, and also, like, we are running this online portal where it was a magazine basically started from 2016. So we are trying to build a literary movement here also to try to organize people. So if you see this dynamic of like the Orissa population, then it is mostly SC/ST population composed of around 40%. So despite of that, you hardly see the kind of voice we have seen in South, and then Western India, particularly in Maharashtra, and then Northern India, Uttar Pradesh. So there is hardly any voice. So like we are working, and there are now recently there are Bhim Army, then BSP is working, then BAMSA and other such like Ambedkarite organization are working in the ground. So hopefully we will be challenging the kind of hegemony Savarna community is having in Odisha. Yeah.
And when it comes to NEP, a new education policy has been introduced. How should we understand NEP in the context of oppressed realities, and what will be its implications on the marginalized sections?
Yeah. So NEP, before like talking to NEP, so I would like to mention that, and I have like in another interview I have said this same thing also. Okay. India's education policy is always been exclusionary towards the oppressed community, and that's what that is why we have seen that like hardly like any representation of the marginalized section in education system, especially in higher education. They are like being underrepresented across, and education policy is brought out to basically build a strong nation state. Whether it is, I'm talking about right now, it is at the time of Congress, it was so it was like basically to build a national unity, and what right now BJP is doing is the same thing. So I would say I was reading some of the portion of new education policy, and what I find is it is a package. Basically it is a package of Brahminism and Brahmanical ideology. Basically when there are so much focus on Sanskrit, and then you have Hindi and all. So what they're signaling is that basically they are going to the direction of that to propagate their Brahmins ideology, and this hydra-headed the idea of nationalism and nation state basically. And so basically the education is just a tool to strengthen their Brahmanical monopoly over all the institution, and basically teach it is from primary education to the higher education to regulate the thought process of the people and thought process of the student, and reoriented them in that nationalist Brahmanical ideology. That's what I see. Current education policy is a package of Brahmanical ideology and Brahminism itself.
Thank you so much for speaking to Grounded Voices. That was Jitendra Suna at twocirclesTV, the mainstream news of the marginalized. Thank you.